Hi, Sam. Yeah, nice to have you on my relaunch of my podcast, The Missing Pages. This podcast is about shamanism, curanderismo, and jungle medicines. And yeah, I would love to hear um, your story with your the ayahuasca experience, and that thing went on from 2019 onwards, as I heard in some of your Soul Seeker podcast episodes.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me, Akshay. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you and your audience and being on this journey and path alongside you. So, for me, I started my first business in college back in 2011. By 2019, I was named Silicon Valley's 40 under 40 list. I was 31 years old. I just had built the business up to a seven-figure business while working a day with no employees, just freelancers, virtual assistants. And I achieved a lot of the goals that I had been working so hard for, yet I felt so empty within. I felt so depressed. And I was also going through an on off again relationship. And that was kind of the catalyst that had me to actually like look at it. Whereas before, I was just a hamster on a wheel chasing success, and then I would get and then I was like, okay, a bigger goal for next time. But that that ruptured relationship was really the thing that led to like, hey, there's something more here. It led to about a month long numbing depression, which then led to a breathwork journey, which then led to ayahuasca. And then from there, I changed my entire life and I moved out of Silicon Valley to the beach of Santa Cruz. I got out of the toxic relationship. I started to go down the path of spirituality with blinders on. And here I am over almost 5.5 years later. And now I'm breathwork
Mm.
facilitator, yoga instructor. I lead men's groups, psychedelic integration guy, and keynote speaker and on the message of soul life balance. And I have a breath club as well. So completely different person as
Yeah.
well. And that's kind of just the high level of it.
When you were first stepping into the container of that spiritual world, like how did that unfold for you? Was it also like just coming in your way, or did you go out and try to connect and find out more? And how did that journey start?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think when it comes to medicine specifically, just speaking about medicine here for a moment, there's a lot of people that just are like, oh, yeah, I want to do ayahuasca or even a mushroom ceremony, whatever the thing might be. And then they kind of approach it in their masculine. And what I mean by the masculine is I equate the masculine to the yang energy. I equate that to the outer world. And to be clear with these terms, the outer world is how we experience the world with our five senses. It has everything to do with responsibilities, obligations. It's the human doing. Whereas the inner world is that connection to that more archetypal energy of the feminine, which is our higher self, our mental, emotional state, obviously our spirituality, our higher self, right? And the masculine energy of like, let me just do this thing as opposed to be would be like, all right, well, I want to do ayahuasca. I feel like I should do it. So let me go on Google and like start to Google this thing, right? That's
Yeah.
very masculine energy. For me, it was the opposite. It was like it was undeniable. I was doing
Hmm.
yoga for a number of years by then,
Hmm.
but the way everything unfolded, I wasn't really like into quote unquote spirituality. I didn't even know spirituality was a choice, right? Like I didn't even realize
Yeah.
it was a thing, but it
Yeah.
became so undeniable that I was just saying yes because I was at this place of rock bottom being like, I don't know what's going on here, but this is just being set up for me. So I really like to say, like, for a lot of us on this journey, like, especially when we're early on, it becomes like so undeniable that we're just following the whispers and we don't even have the language or know-how to know what's going on. We're just like trusting because we're at this place of surrender. But then once we start to get into it a little bit more, then we learn how to navigate it. And then those old tendencies of like human doings start
Mm.
to come through, and we try to do our way through it. And which is why my message is of soul life balance, which soul is like that connection to the inner world, the yin, and life is the connection to the outer world, the yang. So it's a balance of both.
Yeah. Yeah, I do get the I had a spiritual coach, and she helped me guide through my post medicine experiences, where she kind of guided me into the being in the where you allow the intuition to come up, and you just let um, alignment happen right in front of you. And even in my personal journey, I didn't really had to go out for it. I had an intention of doing it for learning and opening a more understanding of medicinal plants and botany. And things just started coming right into my timeline. And so you were doing yoga before you went into the plant medicine journey. So did that give you a tool set of handling those experience really well, or and how did that help you with it?
Yeah, yoga is such an interesting thing, right? Because like in the West, we think of yoga as movement, and I actually have my first international retreat coming up in Costa Rica in a few months, and I'm going to be
Mhm.
teaching yoga. And when I say teaching yoga, a big piece of what I'm going to be teaching is philosophy, because the movement is just 1/8, right? So like
Yeah,
the movement side that I have experienced in yoga classes didn't help me much in going into like an ayahuasca ceremony. You know,
yeah,
obviously, a traditional yoga class has some meditation, a little bit of breath work, depending on the
yeah,
teacher. But it's just like a little, it's maybe like 80% asana, then, 15% meditation, 5% breath work. Like just
yeah,
maybe there's like 2% of philosophy in there.
yeah.
So, what helped me more than yoga was doing a breathwork journey, and the style of breathwork that I was led in was transformational breath. The style
Mm.
that I am certified in and I now teach is somatic breath work, which is very similar. But in terms of vernacular, I think of it as a breathwork journey versus exercise, and difference being breathwork
Mm.
exercises are those like daily things that we can do to help
Mm.
alleviate stress and anxiety to shift into rest and digest. Whereas a breathwork journey is an intentional ceremony to dive into the
Yeah,
depths of our psyche to stimulate that trauma response to alleviate
yeah.
like that stored energy over time. So, with that said, when the breathwork journey found me, I literally felt reborn. I literally felt
Wow.
I was having a seizure and I was going to die. I still can remember over 5.5 years later coming back into my body and having this person I didn't even know. I met him just, I think that day, I had one phone call on him guiding me, just hearing his voice and being like, what is going on? And like feeling myself coming
Wow.
back into my body. And for ayahuasca, what really helped me was one, I was in this emotional and mental state of rock bottom. So like it wasn't a choice to surrender. It's so much harder to surrender when
Yeah.
you like things are like kind of okay or things are good. But when you're at rock bottom, at least for me, it's like I give up and I give in. And it's not really like a give up, give in, white flag. It's just like to what is. Like I don't have
Yeah.
any resistance. So what came in really strong with the ayahuasca ceremony, the first one I did was breath and breathing and really being connected with my breath. And another thing I am really grateful for is they actually led us through a breathwork journey before drinking the medicine, which really helped as well. Now, my business that I mentioned earlier that
Yeah.
I've been in since 2011 that I finally exited here in 2024, but I've been
Mm.
working on exiting ever since that ayahuasca ceremony in 2019. That
Yeah.
industry is promotional products, branded
Yeah.
merchandise. So I actually sold branded merch to other companies. Well, the breath became so powerful for me in that ayahuasca ceremony
Yeah.
that I went out and printed a bunch of t-shirts and hoodies and all kinds of stuff that just water bottles that just said
Yeah.
breathe, nothing else,
Yeah.
just breathe, and
Yeah.
really small, like
Yeah.
somewhere else, like my company name. And then lo and behold, in less than a year later, we're in the lockdowns and
Yeah.
everyone wanted this swag I had that said breathe.
Breathe. Yeah.
And how ironic it was. So that's kind of the story there of what really helped me to anchor into a place of surrender.
Yeah, I get the point of breathing. I think in one of my ayahuasca ceremonies, the message I got was just to have this strong exhale and just sit down within my body and just exhale the stress away. And also when I was breathing on the medicine, I would feel each cell of my body all along the lungs and the respiratory tract just getting energized.
Yeah, I mean it's prana, So
Yeah.
yeah.
And do you also incorporate breathing exercises in your yoga while going through stressful moments, even the plant medicine journeys and daily life, and how share that with other people and incorporating in their stressful lives and stuff?
Yeah, going back to yoga, when yoga finally clicked for me, it was because the yoga instructor was cueing the breath on every movement and so
Mhm.
intentional about it. And the way she said it just landed with me. So I don't have a regular yoga class that I teach on a weekly basis anymore, given my
Mm.
travel schedule. It's just too hard to maintain that. But when I did teach yoga regularly, like my big emphasis was cueing the breath, like all the time, all throughout the class. Absolutely. Now I focus more on breath work. After I started teaching yoga, I did my teacher training. Then I got certified in breath work. And then that was kind of like the transition to being like, yeah, breath work's a little bit more my thing than teaching yoga.
Mm.
So I have a
Yeah.
monthly breath club where I teach people a different
Mm.
lesson every single week. We have a theme and then daily accountability on WhatsApp and a Zoom call. And my latest book called Overcome the Overwhelm has a 6-step breath process to
Yeah.
access inner peace. So before we hit record, you mentioned Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, whom I had on
Yeah.
my podcast, and she did this TED talk that blew up. It was the first one that
Yeah.
went viral. It really helped TED to go viral, and
Yeah.
as a result, she was named to one of Time's top 100 most influential people back in
Wow.
2008. But what's
Mm.
so fascinating to me is in mindful and spiritual circles, and even in like yoga and breathwork trainings, at least the ones I've done, and I know this as well from asking other facilitators if they know about this, and they don't know about it either. In all these different circles and trainings, most of them don't talk about the 90-second rule. And my intuition is that, like in spiritual circles, we get so caught up in like intuition and feelings. And trust me, that's where I live. Like 90% of
Mm.
me is all intuition. I am not a science-based guy. Like you've listened to my podcast.
Yeah.
If anyone listens and I'm talking with someone that is like, I just did one yesterday with a psychiatrist. I'm like, I probably sound like a bumbling fool when I try to talk about science. So I get it in terms of like
Yeah.
feelings and intuition, but I do think there is a time and place for science, especially when people are kind of resistant or on the fence. So with all of that buildup, what Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor taught in her TED talk that blew up back in 2008 was the 90-second rule. And the ninety
Mm.
second rule teaches us that our body has a 90-second physiological response when we experience an emotion. Now, if we couple that with emotions being energy in motion, now it starts to make sense when we connect the dots like, oh, wow, like I understand that emotions are energy in motion. I've heard that a million times, right? And
Mm.
okay, thanks. That's not new. That's
Yeah.
cliche, but is that actually
Mm.
integrated in embodied within me when I am
Mm.
experiencing this emotion? Am I allowing myself to feel it, or am I storing it in my body because I'm in resistance? Well, by understanding the 90-second rule that these energies, these emotions will move through
Mm.
us because our body
Mm.
has that physiological response. Now it
Mm.
becomes not so scary to just be like, all right, I'm going to allow myself to feel this emotion so it can
Mm,
move through me. So that's the 6-step breath process. The 6-step
yeah.
breath process teaches what you can actually do in those couple of minutes, and you can zoom out as well and apply that to your life as a way to integrate spirituality into everyday life. So everything leads with breath work for me.
So, yeah, in order to have a sort of like an illustration of the 90-second process. So let's say I just had I went through a layoff, like a huge company layoff, and I have to pay rent and all that. And I'm sitting down and I'm like, I have anxiety about like what will happen tomorrow, what will happen a week after. And so I'm going through that like heavy emotion and fear. So for the 90 seconds, how will that process play out? Like if you can explain me if that's a yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. We'll just walk through a little breath work exercise. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So first thing I know, to answer your question directly is like after, I'm not the scientist here and I'm going to keep it real. Like
Yeah.
for me, it's
Yeah.
like not after 90 seconds, but after a few minutes of like processing, if I'm
Mm,
still like feeling this, then what's happening is the mind is replaying the story and now the body
yeah.
is re-experiencing it. Because when we are experiencing the anxiety of, oh, will I have enough money and blah, 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 all that other stuff,
Mm,
we're just caught in the mind. We're not in our
yeah.
body. So it's
Yeah.
somatic experiencing. So for the listeners, if you are driving or anything like that, please don't close your eyes or breathe with us. Just listen. But if you are in a place where you can close on your eyes, I would invite you to go through this experience with Akshay and I, and then we'll unpack it. So we'll just close our eyes and we'll start to go internal. So let's imagine that we just got laid off and we have a bunch of bills and a lot of different things that we got to pay. A lot of fear is coming up. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to respond. Reacting would be, say, maybe emotionally binge eating or something else. Whatever it might be, scrolling on social media, something that's in avoidance. But we're already going to say we've made the decision that we're going to respond. So the very first step in the breath process is B, breathe to slow down. So right now, let's just go ahead and keep the eyes closed, sitting up a little bit straight, and just beginning to elongate the inhales and exhales, breathing in through the nose and letting the exhales be longer than the inhales. And we're going to just relax into this so that we can feel these different energies, these different emotions that are moving through us. The second step in the breath process is relax so that we can feel almost like a meditation, just noticing these different thoughts and just dropping out of our mind and into our body as we continue to inhale and exhale. As we start to relax into and feel these emotions, we can begin to get curious. The E in the breath process, energy to reveal. What are these different energies revealing to me? Is there a story? Is there a narrative, a limiting belief? Maybe it's that I won't have enough money to take care of my family. How soon can I get another job so that I can be making money? What are these different energies around this example of getting laid off bringing up? Maybe it's connection to inner childhood and growing up in a family where there was a belief that money is hard to come by, money is scarce. And oftentimes, when we start to get curious, we start to build some resistance. Maybe it's that I don't have time to see this. I don't know what to do with this. This doesn't feel good, any of that at all. And it's for that reason we slide into the fourth step in the breath process, the A, which is accept, to surrender. Just coming back to our breath, inhaling and exhaling, and allowing ourselves to accept and surrendering to what this energy is revealing to us. And when we get to a place of acceptance, it's then that we earn the right. to transform what's happening and what's showing up into an empowering belief. This is the T, the fifth step in the breath process. Transform into empowering beliefs. I'm always supported by the universe. I know based on prior experience in my life, I will make it through this. Whatever feels most natural to you, usually something that is the opposite of that energy that's being revealed to you. What is an empowering belief that you can take with you? And finally, we get to the H, habits to integrate. This is the most important piece that most people don't think about, but it's what are the next actions, habits, or behaviors? What can I integrate as a result of what's being shown to me? Maybe it's that this energy is bringing about fear. Wow, I have a lot of unprocessed fear around security and safety, and money represents that. How can I dive into this deeper? Wow, I'm going to realize or see that this might come in over the next couple of days, and I need to be with this. What am I going to do if I come into a state of panic later today, tomorrow, over the next few days over this? What is something positive I can do? Maybe I can anchor in this positive affirmation. Maybe I can go deeper into why this story feels like I won't be safe, or some habits, actions, and or behaviors I can take. And when you're ready, through the nose, inhaling all the way up, sipping in a bit more air at the top, and exhaling, letting it go. And just reminding yourself that you are always supported. You have all the tools you'll ever need within. And it's so easy to just take a couple minutes to connect to your inner world, to reground and recenter. In your own time, just flickering the eyes back open.
Yeah.
So that's it right there, running through the 6 steps in that example.
Yeah, that was really nice.
So let's
Yeah.
pretend that's the case for you. Like
Hmm.
now, if you currently did just get laid off, and just pretend that you did,
Hmm.
like now, how do you feel now? Do you feel like you're still in that place of worry and anxiety?
So I think this exercise really grounds you back into the nervous system. I could just feel grounded into the safety of my body. And that itself is um, very, I feel more secure. And within this present moment, there's no physical threat. There's no immediate concern. So when I'm right in the moment, there is this comfort, and I have this like obvious appreciation of like, okay, everything is fine right now.
Yeah, that's great. And that's exactly it. The subtitle of the book is the 6-step breath process to access inner peace. And what you're describing is that place of peace. Well, no, every single moment is going to be different, right? Something that can happen right this
Mm,
very moment right
mm,
now, maybe a few minutes from now, maybe an hour from
mm,
now, that
mm,
may trigger you, may put you in a
mm.
different state. So it's almost this game of, I gotta find a better way of explaining it, but I say whack-a-mole, when like that arcade game with
Yeah,
the mole comes up, whack
yeah,
it, because
yeah.
the aggression, it really isn't like that. It's not so much like a
Mm,
whack it, it's more of like a catching it and be like, ah, there
yeah,
it is. Okay, let
yeah,
me just come back to it. But I
yeah.
love what Dr. Joe Dispenza teaches, and he says to say change. I have a lot of clients that love the word cancel, but it's like when that
Mm,
old negative belief or fear or anxiety or stress or whatever comes back in, bringing that awareness about, say, change, and you're triggering the neural pathways in the brain to create new neural networks to break the habit of those fear cycles so that you can come back to this experience of peace. So that's kind of the 90-second rule applied, because a lot of
Mm,
times people are like, yeah, but I still feel that way afterwards. And it's like,
mm,
well, yeah, exactly, because our feelings are always changing. It's just
yeah.
about bringing moment awareness, which is the name of the game
Mm,
anyway.
yeah. My own personal practice is not expanded the way you do it, but it's more of the box breathing and then just getting grounded and just feeling how my feet are touching the floor, how my hands are feeling, how the tongue and the saliva feels into my body. And it does something similar that it kind of grounds me into the safety of the present moment.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, in the
Yeah.
book, or when I give keynotes on the 6-step breath process, I wrote a whole book on it, and hour long speech,
Yeah.
right? So there's so much
Yeah.
more to say, but I do talk about box breathing and different forms of
Yeah.
breath work you can
Yeah.
use. And all of those are great. That's just like a small piece to it. Like one of the
Yeah.
biggest pieces, the two biggest pieces really are energy to reveal, that piece between
Yeah.
that and acceptance, and then the
Yeah.
other side of it, the book and the closing of habits to integrate. Because if I'm just doing some box breathing and just feeling into it, I feel good now, but I'm not making any positive
Mm,
changes. And I tell my clients or anyone listening all the time, like, listen, I don't want you to be doing the 6-step breath process all the time, because if you're
yeah.
doing it all the time, it means that it's not working for you. If you're using it
Mm,
properly, you're focusing on that final piece, habits to integrate, so that you're
mm,
taking action, so that you have less of these moments coming up, so you don't actually
yeah.
need to use this tool.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. Because there is this trap of spirituality as well, where you can get into this mode of going into the practices while you're not paying attention to what needs to be done and the awareness that is arising, whether that moment has another kind of fear attached, a childhood trauma attached, a childhood limitation attached. Yeah. And can you expand a little more on um, energy to reveal? I would like to hear how you describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part, I mean, this is really anchoring into everything is happening for me, right? And we're not
Yeah.
just like repeating cliches of like, oh, everything's happening for you, not to you. It's like getting curious. How is this happening for me? What is the lesson here, right?
Mm,
If I'm continuously feeling some sort of fear around finances, there is a
mm,
deeper piece of programming that needs to
mm,
get addressed, and that is this energy that is being revealed. It's this energy of anxiety or stress or fear, whatever it is for that specific
yeah.
person around this example, and not money, but what money represents to most
Yeah.
people, which would be safety and security. So why don't I believe that I will be taken care of? What are these pieces of programming that I really need to go into the weeds here and dig them out and reprogram them into something that is more empowering for me? This is the
Yeah.
shadow work piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is a comfort that arises when you do different plant medicines and like go through that path where you can sometimes feel the embrace from the universe and then this feeling of being always taken care of. And over the course of last 4 years, when during the lockdowns I left Toronto, I sold everything. I lived in Amazon for a year and studied with Shipibo. So in that process, things were unfolding, and I had no idea how my next day or my next week would be like. But I was given chances of learning, and when you took this step of stepping out of the normal container of uh, the world of business that you were familiar with, how did you create a kind of like a community to nurture those new understandings and nurture those new meanings that were like unfolding in front of you? Like how did that play out in your journey?
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems of psychedelic medicine, plant earth medicine ceremonies these days, and there's no great solution to it because the facilitators need to really be focused on what they do best, and that's be in the medicine space. They should be there and have tools and resources before and after as well. But in terms of like really holding your hand and helping you to integrate afterwards what is often an earth shattering experience, that's not so much their role, in my opinion. You know, if they are a
Mm,
big organization and they have integration therapists or coaches and guides set up, that's beautiful, that's amazing. But not everyone can do that, and not
yeah,
everyone should be serving medicine either. So there's
yeah,
a lot of Wild West type of things there.
yeah.
That said, in my experience of doing ayahuasca, I felt like they did a great job in preparation and in the ceremony itself and integration, for what they were doing. But at the same time, like it wasn't enough for what I needed, and I didn't have the tools at the time to know that. I
Mm,
just knew I needed something more because none of my actual friends or family members could relate to what I was going through. So the only people that I really knew were these new people that I was meeting, which was cool and everything, but I didn't wasn't really like connected with them. It was more like
mm,
on me, and there wasn't really much guidance. So I would say for about the first 6 months or so, I felt very lost. I felt very confused in
mm,
this reality, kind of as you put it, this dream state, you know.
yeah.
And then I stumbled upon a Facebook ad for Aubrey Marcus's Mastermind Fit for Service, and I joined Fit for Service all of 2020, all of 2021. And that was everything I needed because that was not only the community, like large community of people,
Mm,
but in-person summits and events and coaching and frameworks. So that was
mm,
really the thing that helped me to integrate, was like the guidance of community, as opposed to just like, oh, let me go on this deep dive on YouTube or this Audible or this podcast, or,
mm,
just stop watching anything I watched before and only watch
yeah,
Gaia, and just
yeah,
be kind of alone in the process. Yeah.
yeah. So you had to give yourself a little bit of space. And did you take time off from regular life interactions, and or you had that going while your social life is going on?
Um, Yeah, I mean, around the time of doing ayahuasca the first time in April of 2019, I moved an hour away to the beach town of Santa Cruz. A few months later, was going through separation from that relationship. Started spending a lot of time at the beach and outdoors and just being in
Mm,
nature, and started to realize how much I love to be in my own energy. Started to change some of the ways I approached business. Like I mentioned earlier, I was working less than
mm,
4 hours a day. So I did have plenty of time to
mm,
not be just like working. I was very entrenched in fantasy football, and our fantasy football league
mm,
was like nuts. We had a chat going 365 days a year. We would put
yeah,
alarms on for 3 a.m. to do our
yeah,
waivers to get the top players. The podcast
mm,
I was listening to, all the content I was consuming for like 3 years, 70% of it, just putting a ballpark number on it, was fantasy football related. So I told the guys, hey, I
yeah,
can't do this anymore. I gotta leave the league. And
yeah.
they basically disowned me, and like all the toxic masculine type names and
Oh, wow.
traits came out on their end.
Yeah,
So I didn't have those friends anymore. So it was even more lonely. So yeah, I
yeah,
had to make a lot of changes in my life. And I just it got really lonely. And it was also a really beautiful chapter to just like be in
yeah.
my own energy and be immersed in nature a lot.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I think that stage comes with every person who tries to seek that path. And your circle of friends, your community changes, and it becomes really hard to go back to that world now and every time I find a container or a portion of my life where I'm feeling, let's say if I'm traveling abroad or in a place that I might not have a company or friends circle, I utilize that time to spend on self-learning and upgrading in some way and reconnecting with their own purpose. And so how do you what are the other ways that you use to integrate a new awareness, a new meaning that you discovered or felt coming through a download or something?
Yeah, for sure. I wrote a whole book on this. It's called Soul Life Balance, and the subtitle is A
Yeah.
Guide to Igniting and Integrating Spiritual Awakening. So it goes
Mm.
deep with tools, resources, all the things. I have an online course called Structured Flow that
Sure.
is frameworks that I use. And I start off usually doing something that I call a soul life evaluation. So we talked about like feminine, masculine, yin, yang, and soul and life.
Mm.
And it's a series of like questions for us to like somatically to feel into, to kind of do a blending of this feminine and masculine, where the feminine will be like feeling into it in the self-inquiry, like the reflection, the contemplation, and the masculine is like, hey, there's a framework and a structure to
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
so we can actually like
yeah.
get to it. And that's the idea of the course being called Structured Flow, so we can
Mm.
have structure and to get more flow, and it's not
Yeah.
just one or the other. The second into ultimate potential, which is a mind-blowing reframe. I remember my yoga teacher trainer, Dakota Shea, saying to name your ultimate potential is to limit your ultimate potential. And that blew my
Mm.
mind. So I have a lesson around that, which uses the yogic
Mm.
philosophy of sadhana, which means
Mm.
basically your daily spiritual practice, and to be centered and grounded in the journey as opposed to the destination. So a lot of people I work with are either business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, but like a lot of professionals that really resonate with like structure, but
Yeah.
want to get away from like traditional structure and goal setting to have like a new, refreshing approach. From
Mm.
there, we get into a lot of different activities. I don't know all of them off the top of my head. I know that there's some subconscious mind reprogramming. We have a whole letting go
Mm.
ceremony with a despacho ceremony, a breath work journey. I get into parts work, internal family systems,
Yeah.
mindful communication internally, holding
Mm.
space for ourselves internally, holding space for others, energetic hygiene, like all of it, all of it. So kind of
Mm.
for me, like my human design is a manifester. So, it's nice getting into that type of work, because it's like, oh, now this makes sense why my brain processes this way. And so many people are like, why are you like that? Making me feel different. But
Yeah.
it's like, oh, actually, my design is for this way. And it's a small
Mm.
percentage of people on this planet. So it makes sense why a lot of people think I'm different, or I think I'm
Yeah.
different, whatever.
Yeah.
So, understanding my human design as a manifester, I'm like, oh, that makes sense at being like kind of a visionary, how I can take these complex type of topics and
Mm.
simplify them and create a roadmap for something that really doesn't have a roadmap. Because
Yeah.
one of the most beautiful things about integrating spiritual awakenings into everyday life is that there's no roadmap. And at the
Yeah.
same time, one of the most disorienting things is that there's no roadmap. So
Yeah.
even though I have this roadmap and course, like when I'm mostly working with clients one-on-one these days for like awakening experiences versus group programs, which I find to be so better for me and for them, because in a group program, we're following the roadmap. In a one-on-one setting, it's like, hey, we have this roadmap, but even though like I just did something with a client where we were on like week 3, and we jumped to a letting go ceremony that was later
Mm.
on in the program, because it was like, this is where you're at right now. Or I'll
Yeah.
bring in things that aren't even in the program. So
Yeah.
all of that is the flow, all of that is the connection to the intuition. And I think a really big piece for people to hear and for this to land is giving ourselves permission to stop gaslighting our intuition, because so
Yeah.
often the intuition comes and then the ego comes in and it just gets straight to chattiness and gaslighting ourselves. And that keeps
Yeah.
us more stuck.
So when you're guiding people to be more authentic and be more into like start following their intuition, does that do you see that that path takes them out of their regular life and they have to just leave that path, like their corporate self or that behind, or how does that um
Yeah, I mean,
show
I
up?
think with corporate clients that just want to alleviate stress and anxiety, not so much because they're not ready to go deeper. They're just kind
Yeah.
of like looking for basic mindfulness, almost like you brought up yoga a few times earlier. Like, you
Mm.
know, breath work in a lot of ways is where yoga was at 20 years ago. And yoga is so popular now. It's been popular for years and years in a corporate structure. And I think now, like regulating the nervous system and mental health in the workplace and breath work are kind of things that corporate structures or corporations are starting to be interested in. And I think that some people are starting to get cracked open as a result of that. But for the most part, like it's another tool that they're utilizing, and it's not
Yeah.
necessarily a deep dive. And it's not
Mm.
my job to be project onto them that
Yeah.
they should quote unquote take a red pill. Now,
Yeah.
for the other side, because it's confusing, I work on both sides of the fence where I'm doing deep dives with like psychedelic integration or just
Mm.
spiritual awakening integration. And my clients just happen to be like business professionals. For them, the number one constant is a career transition. Any
Yeah.
person I've met that has worked with plant and earth medicine in a ceremonial setting recently, like for the
Mm.
first time, the number one theme is a career transition. It is so few and far between, like a very small percentage that people don't have a career transition looming. It does not mean to say that because you do psychedelics, psychedelic therapy and or plant medicine and earth medicine ceremonies that you will have a career transition. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's
Mm.
very likely.
Yeah.
And the other thing is if it's not a career transition, then it's probably going to be a relationship transition. Those are the two most common themes, and sometimes it can be both. So it's going to be different on a case by case setting. And the most important thing is to approach it with discernment. Discernment would represent the yang, the life side, and intuition would be the feminine, the yin energy, the inner world. So again, it's everything I do. I look at from a blending of masculine, feminine, soul life, yin yang, being like, let me follow my intuition, but
Mm.
no, I'm not going to get so carried away here and bringing it back to gaslighting and be like,
Mm.
oh, okay, everything is all like perfect, and I'm just going to leave this corporation, and I'm just going to trust the universe will provide for
Yeah.
what's next. Like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe that works for you, but usually that's when people fall on their face, right? And then the
Yeah.
other side is the gaslighting piece to be like, oh no, like this is too big, like this is the thing, but it's scary, it's hard. I'm not sure how I can
Mm.
do it. So I'm just going to play small and not make that change, which is why it's going to be different for
Mm.
everyone. And that's why it's so important to use these different integration tools like parts work or, you know, learning how to do breath work so that you can find answers
Mm.
for yourself, doing the soul life evaluation,
Mm.
finding your daily sadhana practices, things like that, so that you can maintain this frequency. And it's not something that we're chasing and going back to the medicine space because we need answers from the medicine.
Perfect. Adding to that, can I ask you, I'll just ask you one last question of I'm pretty sure in your journey you would have you've gone this through this transition slightly. And how do you step into that state of power? How do you bring that side into reality? And how do you show up to the world as this new integrated person of this newer understanding and this old self? And how do you um, present yourself to the world? I
I mean, I just try to be as vulnerable and as real as possible. When I'm speaking on stage, like I have a new thing that I'm doing where I'm kind of leading them through a tough experience. I recently spoke to a corporation that had, I think, 7 suicides last year. So I shared
Mm,
my story with suicide, and I didn't get like super graphic, but I got enough
mm,
to get some feels in people. And then
mm,
afterwards, I taught him about a lion's breath, and I led him through a lion's breath. And I say this thing like stick out your tongue like Gene Simmons, and everyone laughs,
yeah,
right? And because we're sticking out our tongue and doing
yeah,
a
yeah,
lion's breath in a corporate setting where most of them have never
mm,
heard of a lion's breath before, and the
yeah,
room just becomes so much lighter. And then I
yeah,
pause and I allow them to feel that lightness. And then I bring it full circle, kind of like break that fourth wall and be like, now, do you notice
yeah,
how it felt before the
yeah,
lion's breath and
yeah,
how it feels now? When I say the
yeah,
90-second rule, we can process
mm,
emotions in 90 seconds. That is a real time example. So, like, for me, it's, just trying my best to embody like being a student of the universe and really think of myself
yeah,
more as like a guide as opposed to a coach. I'll say coach for sure, but I don't think there's a hierarchy, and I'm constantly learning from new people, and it's not necessarily learning from people because they're like better, more equipped than me. It's like looking at people as a mirror as myself and be like, okay, where is that in me? And how can I learn from this situation? So embodiment and just, yeah, I guess embodiment would be the way to answer your
mm,
question.
yeah. This is a really nice way of explaining it, and this reminded me of how psilocybin used to I mean magic, yeah, psilocybin teach me that lesson is any situation that I have before going into that ceremony and intention or whatever intention, it would show me that problem or that issue in a way that I cannot think of it being anything other than being humorous. Like it just gets like super
Mhm.
funny. It's just um, so, and then, yeah, with the lion's breath exercise, there is that same kind of a state break where you break the tension build up into this like humorous other side of that story. So, this was really nice. Yeah, yeah, really, I had a fun conversation. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I would. Yeah. What else? Yeah, I guess. Um, we did cover like it's like slightly going through the journey, finding your way, and then trying to embody it and presenting a complete self to the world. And
Mhm.
yeah, I definitely would love to talk to you more and go deeper into the crazy world of channeling entities and all that in the future at some point. Yeah,
Yeah, anytime for sure. Thank
yeah,
you so much for having me on the show,
yeah,
brother. And
yeah,
yeah, the
yeah.
final thing I would say is like, at least for me, when
Mm,
I get to a place of like that awakening experience, it's
mm,
wow, it's all so simple. And then the ego
yeah,
comes in after that, and it's like, and you overcomplicate the fuck out of it. And then
yeah, yeah,
now the next evolution is my true self coming through saying, and that's okay.
yeah.
So it's also simple. As humans, we do as humans do. We
Mm,
overcomplicate it,
yeah.
and that's okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Akshay. Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.